My brother's suicide note wasn't his, it was mine. It was a Sunday, sunny, almost aggressively so. The kind of day where the light seems to mock you, punching through the windows with no regard for the mood inside. The air outside smelled like grass and barbecue charcoal, the kind of scent that belongs to block parties, laughter, and kids screaming while chasing each other around with popsicles. The neighborhood was alive. Dogs barked behind white fences, sprinklers hissed, and someone somewhere had a radio playing some 90s rock anthem like life was exactly as it should be. But not on our street. Not in front of the house where I spent my awkward teenage years trying to become anyone else. Not where the red and blue lights flashed so hard they stained the driveway like bruises. Not where two officers stood stone-faced beside my mom, who sat on the porch like her body had just given up on remembering how to hold itself together. I got the call at 10:37 a.m. I remember that time like a brand on my brain. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, holding my phone in one hand and typing a message with the other. A half-baked, poorly worded apology to a girl I had ghosted during one of my depressive spirals. I had just typed, "I know I messed up, but..." When the screen lit up with Mom, I never finished that sentence. I never sent the message. The second I heard her voice, I knew something had cracked. It wasn't what she said, it was what she didn't. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't ask me to come home. She just said my name like it was the only thing she could remember how to say. And then, with the weight of 1,000 shattered mornings in her throat, she said, "It's Drew, my little brother, 23, quiet, brilliant in ways that didn't always make sense to other people. He had this mind that worked in numbers and theories, like the universe made more sense to him in formulas than in feelings. He could build a computer from scraps, explain the laws of thermodynamics, but struggled to say, 'I'm having a hard day.' He wasn't antisocial, just misaligned with the world's frequency. He was the kind of person who'd rather sit in the garage listening to ambient electronica while assembling a drone than go to a party. He never demanded space, he just lived quietly in it. My mom found him that morning. She had gone into the garage to look for an old cooler. She told me later it took her a full 30 seconds to understand what she was seeing. He was sitting upright, slumped against the pegboard wall, his hands resting limply in his lap. The sunlight was coming through the high window, hitting his hair like some cruel spotlight, like he had staged it that way, like he wanted to be seen just once. A long black extension cord ran from the ceiling beam, disappearing behind his back. I wasn't there. I didn't see it with my own eyes, but I can't stop picturing it. There was a note, left neatly on the workbench beside an old screwdriver and, strangely, a used Polaroid camera. One of the old ones, with the thick body and the satisfying click were sound. We didn't even know we still had one, probably tucked away in a box of our dad's things. He died years ago, cancer, quick and mean. But that's not the strange part. The strange part is the note. It was addressed to me, but it wasn't written by Drew. It was my handwriting, my words, word for word, sentence for sentence. I knew them like a scar. I had written that note over a year ago during my lowest point, after I lost my job, my apartment, and what felt like every ounce of control I thought I had over my life. I wrote it on a stormy night when I couldn't see a reason to keep waking up. I folded it and left it on my nightstand like some sad punctuation mark at the end of a silent scream. But I never went through with it. Someone interrupted me. A friend knocked on my door that night, completely unannounced, drunk and stupid and worried about his fantasy football team. I lied and said I was just feeling off. We drank, watched reruns. I threw the note into a shoebox with some old journals and forgot about it. Or I thought I had. But now here it was, sitting in front of me again. Only this time it wasn't just a painful memory. It had somehow traveled into Drew's hands, into his head, and turned into his final goodbye. I read it 3 times in the back of my car before the police let me take it. The ink was smudged at the edges like someone had held it too tightly. Maybe he read it while crying. Maybe he read it like scripture, like instruction. The line that gutted me most was the last one. "It's not that I want to die. I just don't know how to live in this noise anymore." I wrote that, and now he was gone. My first thought, after the grief, the nausea, the shaking, was, how the hell did he get it? I hadn't been back home in almost a year. I had moved states, trying to leave behind the version of myself that wrote that letter in the first place. I didn't even tell anyone I had written it. I didn't leave it in a place someone could easily find. So how did Drew end up with it? The garage had always been his space, even when we were kids. He'd retreat there like it was his own personal fortress. Maybe he found the shoebox. Maybe he looked for it. Maybe he'd been carrying more than we realized. Grief is this thing where it folds time in on itself. You start to doubt your memories, question every word you ever said, every silence you left unfilled. Did I miss the signs? Could I have said something? Was I so wrapped up in surviving myself that I didn't see him drowning next to me? That night, after everyone had left and the house was so quiet it felt haunted, I sat on the floor of his bedroom. It smelled like old books and lavender dryer sheets. His laptop was still open, a coding window left running with some script he never finished. I looked around and felt like I had been dropped into someone else's life, someone I thought I knew but clearly didn't. I found the Polaroid tucked under his pillow. It was a picture of the note. Just the note. Perfectly framed. As if to say, look what you gave me. A year before Drew died, I hit what I thought was rock bottom. It was the kind of low that doesn't announce itself all at once, it creeps. A slow erosion of self-worth moment by moment until the ground beneath you finally gives out and you realize there's nothing left to stand on. I'd lost my job first, a company-wide layoff packaged with a scripted apology and a severance check that barely covered 2 months' rent. Then my girlfriend of 3 years left. Said she didn't recognize me anymore. Said I'd become a ghost. She wasn't wrong. I was drowning in debt, living off instant noodles and free coffee from gas stations. My phone buzzed constantly with collections calls. I stopped answering. Stopped checking the mail. Stopped making eye contact with mirrors. The world just kept moving and I was frozen inside it like a mannequin propped up in someone else's life. Every morning, I'd wake up with this invisible weight pressing down on my chest. It felt like waking up already exhausted. Like someone had laid a heavy, wet towel over my entire body, soaked with shame, and expected me to carry it through the day. You start to forget what lightness even feels like after a while. Then one night I broke. I didn't set out to write a note. There wasn't some romanticized moment where I sat down to pour my heart onto paper like in the movies. No candlelight, no music, just a half-empty bottle of Jameson, 3 crushed-up cigarettes, and the kind of silence that hums in your ears when you're truly alone. I grabbed a pen, a legal pad, and I started writing. At first, it was just a way to get the noise out of my head. I wrote about how tired I was. Not in the physical sense, but in the bone-deep way that makes even brushing your teeth feel like a performance. I wrote about how I felt like I was haunting my own life, like I was stuck watching someone who looked like me pretend to function. Nothing felt real anymore. Joy, hunger, touch. It was like the emotional color had been sucked out of the world. I wrote for hours, rambling, repeating myself, scribbling out some lines and underlining others twice. There was nothing poetic about it. It was raw, clumsy, angry, ugly, but it helped. In a strange way, getting it out made the pressure in my chest ease just enough to let sleep take me. I didn't go through with anything. I didn't even plan to. Writing was enough. Maybe just barely. I passed out on the couch with the letter still in my lap. Woke up sometime around noon the next day, head pounding, mouth tasting like ash and regret. I remember looking down at the pages and feeling almost embarrassed. Not by what I wrote, but by how real it had all felt in the moment. And this is going to sound cold, but it's the truth. I forgot about the letter. Not immediately, of course. I folded it up, stuffed it in the bottom of a box filled with old notebooks, tax forms, birthday cards I never threw away. Junk. The kind of stuff you save when you're still pretending there's meaning in clutter. I packed it all away into the attic of the old house, the one we grew up in. The attic Drew and I shared when we were kids. Back then, it was our spaceship. Our laboratory. Our hideout from the world downstairs. We strung up Christmas lights in July and stayed up late making up card games with rules so complicated only we understood them. That attic held secrets, confessions, fights, forgiveness. It was sacred in a way that only childhood spaces can be. When I moved out, Drew took it over, turned it into his own private space. He brought in a desk, a beanbag, shelves for his books. He even mounted a projector screen on one wall where he used to watch old sci-fi films. It was his cocoon. I never thought twice about that box. I assumed it sat there untouched, buried beneath other forgotten things. But Drew must have found it. And not just found it, read it. Absorbed it. Memorized it, maybe? My words, my pain, my rock-bottom moment, it somehow became his. And I never knew. I think that's the part that haunts me the most. Not just that he read it, but that he didn't tell me. That he carried it with him, internalized it until it wasn't my letter anymore. It was his reality. I keep wondering what that was like for him. Finding it. Opening it. Reading line after line written by someone he looked up to, someone he probably thought had it together. Maybe he saw himself in it. Maybe he felt validated. Or maybe it broke something inside him. I'll never know. And I don't get to rewrite it now. There's a moment I keep going back to. A stupid, simple moment. Last Thanksgiving. We were both home, awkwardly avoiding conversation with our relatives, hanging out on the back deck, watching the trees sway like they had better places to be. He was quiet as usual. I remember handing him a beer, and I said something like, "Life gets easier after 25. Just hang in there." He didn't say anything. Just smiled faintly and looked away. Now I wonder if that smile was real, or if he already knew he wasn't planning to stick around that long. If he already knew something I didn't. What would have happened if I asked him that day how he was really doing? Would he have told me? Would it have changed anything? The weight of those unanswered questions is unbearable some days. Grief isn't linear. It loops. It doubles back. It sinks teeth into places you didn't know could hurt. I keep returning to that attic in my mind, standing at the top of the ladder, box in hand, unknowingly passing a loaded weapon into the hands of someone I loved. I gave him my pain, and now he's gone. The detective handed me the Polaroid in a plastic sleeve, like it was evidence of a crime. And maybe it was. Not a crime of law, but of influence. Of accident. Of invisible impact. The photo had been taken in the garage the same day, they assumed. It showed Drew sitting cross-legged on the oil-stained concrete floor, holding my letter in both hands like it was something sacred. His eyes were red and puffy. He'd clearly been crying. But what stopped me, what chilled me to my core, was the look on his face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even sadness. It was relief. Like something had finally clicked into place. Like he had been waiting for confirmation of something he'd already suspected about the world, and this letter, my letter, was the answer he needed. A permission slip. I kept staring at it, trying to decode the expression. Was it resignation? Peace? Something deeper? The detective didn't say much after that. Just that the ruling was clear: suicide. No signs of foul play. No drugs. No forced entry. No notes aside from mine. The coroner had confirmed the time of death as early morning. He must have woken up, gone straight to the garage, and well. I asked if they checked for fingerprints on the Polaroid camera. They had. Just his. It should have ended there. The adults around me, family, friends, even well-meaning acquaintances, seemed to treat grief like a door you walk through. One step after another. You cry, you go numb, you eat something eventually, and then you move on. But I couldn't. The Polaroid followed me. In my sleep. In the shower. I'd close my eyes and see that look on his face, not pained, not panicked, but finished. Like someone who'd been holding their breath for too long and had finally exhaled. I stopped sleeping. My apartment became a mess of coffee cups, half-written thoughts on napkins, and open tabs on suicide psychology. I couldn't shake the need to know. Not just why, but how. How he found the letter. How he copied it. How long he'd been thinking about it. Was he just waiting for the right time? Was I the spark? The guilt bloomed into obsession. I went back to my mom's house a week after the funeral. Said I was there to help her clean out Drew's room. Really, I was chasing ghosts. I tore through everything: his desk drawers, laptop, sketchbooks, the underside of his mattress. I read every post-it, every grocery list, every half-finished to-do list like it might hold a hidden message. Nothing. Until I opened his old sketchbook. It was one of those thick, leather-bound ones he'd carried around since college. I always thought he used it to sketch circuitry or 3D model concepts, but inside were dozens, maybe hundreds of drawings. Some crude, others astonishingly detailed. Most were self-portraits. Or what I assumed were self-portraits: Drew in isolation. Drew half in shadow. Drew dissolving into static. Drew staring at walls that looked like they were breathing. And then I found it. Tucked near the back, almost like he'd tried to hide it, was a full-page drawing in charcoal and ink. Of me. I was sitting on the edge of the attic window. The one we used to sneak out of as kids. Legs dangling. Head bowed. In my right hand, the letter. My letter. In my left, a cigarette, halfway smoked. My mouth was slightly open, like I was about to scream, or sing, or disappear into the night air. I stared at it for 10, maybe 20 minutes. Frozen. He had seen me that night. The night I wrote the letter. The night I almost didn't make it. I thought I had been alone. I swore I had been alone. I wrote in silence. I collapsed on the couch. I thought I had drifted off without witness. But apparently, at some point, maybe while I was pacing or crying or sitting in that window trying to remember what hope felt like, Drew had seen me. And he kept it. Captured it. Not with a camera but with pencil and memory. Suddenly, everything shifted. The Polaroid. The copied letter. The silence. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. He had modeled his ending on mine. Not just the words, but the pose, the vibe, the stillness. It was like he'd built a monument to my lowest moment and then walked straight into it. And I never even knew. All that time, I thought I was shielding him. Protecting him by keeping my pain to myself. I thought being strong meant staying quiet. Smiling at family dinners. Nodding when people asked if I was doing better. I thought that if I didn't speak it aloud, it wouldn't spread. But pain doesn't stay contained. It seeps. It echoes. It finds cracks. And somehow Drew, my brilliant, beautiful, fragile brother, picked up my discarded anguish and made it his truth. I flipped through the rest of the sketchbook in a daze. There were more drawings. Not of me, but of windows. Always windows. Windows in rain. Windows at night. Windows with silhouettes behind them. Looking out. Looking down. It was all there. I just hadn't seen it. Or maybe I hadn't wanted to. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid on Drew's bed, surrounded by his notebooks and the faint smell of his laundry detergent, trying to rewrite the past in my head. If I had stayed up later that night. If I had caught him watching me. If I had asked more questions when he texted me one-word answers. If I had come home more often. If I had said, hey, I know what that weight feels like. But I didn't. And now all I have are echoes. Ink and shadows. A drawing of a scream I never let out and a silence he never broke. After the funeral, I moved back into the house. It wasn't a question. My mom couldn't stay there alone, not in that house, not with the echoes of him around every corner. She never said it directly, but I saw it in the way she flinched when the garage door creaked or how she left the hallway light on at night like Drew might still be walking to the bathroom. So I packed a duffel bag, locked up my apartment, and drove back to the place that built us. Our childhood home. 2-story brick with a yard full of dying grass and memories that refused to fade. The same house where we built blanket forts, fought over Nintendo controllers, and passed notes under each other's doors when words felt too heavy. I moved into our old room. 2 twin beds still there. Mine by the window, his by the door. The posters were gone, replaced years ago, but the bones of the place hadn't changed. I lay in that bed every night, staring up at the popcorn ceiling we once tried to count stars in. At first, I couldn't sleep. Then I didn't even try. I felt like he was still there. Not in some ghost story kind of way. Not haunting me with cold breezes or flickering lights. It was subtler. Like the attic air hadn't moved since the day he left it. Like the silence still carried his shape. Sometimes I'd wake up thinking I heard the faint creak of footsteps above me, his old rhythm, slow and careful. A sound I'd stopped noticing years ago. Grief makes time elastic. Days stretch. Hours shrink. I don't remember exactly what I did for those first 3 weeks, only that I started wearing his clothes. Not intentionally. Just little things at first, his flannel shirt, his socks, a hoodie I found at the back of our shared closet. My hoodie, technically, but it smelled like him. Felt like him. That was the worst part. Grief doesn't just make you miss someone. It makes you become them. Or want to. As if pulling their clothes over your skin could rewind something. Undo something. Let you trade places. And then 3 weeks after we buried him, I found it. Another note. Not in a drawer or tucked into a book. It wasn't hidden, not exactly. Just folded into the front pocket of that same old hoodie, my hoodie that I hadn't worn since college. The one he must have adopted without asking, like younger brothers do. I was heading to take out the trash, hands in the pocket out of habit, when my fingers brushed the edge of folded paper. I thought it was a receipt or an old gum wrapper. But it was heavier than that. Intentional. I unfolded it without thinking, still halfway down the hallway. It was only one line. Written in Drew's unmistakable handwriting, small, neat, like he was always afraid of wasting space. I didn't know it wasn't meant for me. I stopped breathing. It hit me like a truck. No, like a truck and an avalanche and a tidal wave all wrapped in one. I stared at those 8 words until they started to blur. It wasn't just a message. It was an explanation. A confession. A misunderstanding that made too much sense. He didn't steal my letter. He adopted it. Like a stray dog finding shelter under someone else's porch. Like my pain had offered him something his own couldn't, articulation. Permission. Meaning. That night I wrote the letter, I remember feeling like it was a scream I couldn't let out loud. Something primal. Wordless. I had no audience in mind. I never meant for anyone to see it. But Drew did. And instead of seeing it for what it was, a moment, a crack, he saw it as truth. A conclusion. A mirror. I went back to the attic that night. Climbing the ladder felt like trespassing. Like I was stepping into a memory that didn't belong to me anymore. Everything was still there. The desk. The beanbag. The projector. Even the little pile of screws and bits from his last DIY disaster. He had been trying to build his own camera shutter. I sat on the floor and let my fingers trace the carpet grooves like they could lead me somewhere. Somewhere deeper. And all I could think was this. My words had spoken the pain he couldn't name. Drew had always been quiet. Thoughtful in the way some people are born, like silence was stitched into him before language. He didn't cry in public. Didn't yell. Didn't vent. He just carried. And I think he thought that's what being strong meant. God, how many times had I told him to keep his chin up? How many jokes did I make about him being too sensitive? How many subtle signals did I miss because I assumed he'd tell me if something was really wrong? But he did tell me. In the only way he could. By using my voice. When I held that note, those 8 words, I realized something that broke me all over again. I didn't cause Drew's death. But I made it legible. I made it possible to say. My words didn't plant the idea. They translated it. Made it real. Reachable. And for someone who had been drifting silently through pain for who knows how long, maybe that clarity felt like a gift. Maybe that was the cruelest part. I sat in the attic until sunrise, the note still clutched in my hand. I didn't cry. Not then. My body had burned through that phase already. All I felt was this aching, hollow empathy. Like I was mourning 2 versions of us at once, the one that lived and the one that might have if either of us had just said something. Anything. And I kept thinking. What if I had let him read my letter with me? What if I had said, I wrote something and I'm not proud of it, but maybe it'll help you understand where I've been? What if, instead of hiding my pain like a moldy secret in the attic, I had opened the door and invited him to sit in it with me? Would that have changed anything? Or would it have only delayed the inevitable? There are no clean answers. Just a note. A folded piece of paper in a borrowed hoodie. 8 words I'll carry for the rest of my life. It's been 8 months. Grief doesn't feel like it did in the beginning, sharp, choking, immediate. It's quieter now. Slower. Like a song you don't realize is still playing until the room goes silent. Some mornings it creeps up on me like a fog. Other days it just sits beside me, not asking for attention, not offering any either. But it never leaves. I carry that Polaroid in my wallet, tucked behind my ID next to a faded gas receipt and a laminated emergency contact card I never updated. Not as punishment. Not because I need to reopen the wound. But because that photo of Drew holding my words like they were his own reminds me of something I still don't think we talk about enough. That words can echo louder than we ever mean them to. That silence isn't the absence of pain, it's where pain goes when we don't give it room to speak. So I started speaking. Small steps at first. A church basement. A college support group. Then schools. High schools, mostly. At first I spoke anonymously. I didn't want the spotlight. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to interrupt someone's spiral before it was too late. To walk into that invisible room where someone sat, alone with their worst thoughts, and tell them I had been there. That I had almost not made it. That my brother didn't. Eventually, I started telling the full story. I didn't plan it. One day, someone in the back row asked me, "Why do you keep bringing it up?" And I froze. Not because it was cruel, it wasn't. The kid looked confused, not confrontational. But because the question was something I had asked myself 100 times already. Why don't I let my brother rest? The truth hit me before I finished answering. Drew didn't leave behind a legacy. He left behind mine. He used my words to end his life. So now, I use his silence to help others keep theirs. It's not noble. It's not brave. Some days, it feels like trying to bail out a sinking boat with a cracked cup. But it's what I have. And I think he'd want that. That's the thing I keep circling back to. Drew didn't want to die, not exactly. He wanted the pain to stop. He wanted a voice to put it into. And when he found mine, buried in a hoodie in the attic, he must have thought, finally, someone understands. The tragedy is he never knew I survived it. That I woke up the next day, hungover, hollow, but alive. That I eventually climbed out of the pit. That I found things, small things, slow things to live for. He never saw the second act. That's what I tell them now when I speak. That if you end your story at the lowest chapter, you never get to see the parts where the plot twists. where people surprise you, where you surprise yourself. I tell them about Drew, not as a cautionary tale, but as a quiet reminder that the people around you might be carrying words that don't belong to them, that pain echoes, that influence is real, and that sometimes all it takes to change the ending is to read it aloud before you decide it's final. I still miss him every day. Some mornings I hear the coffee machine click on too early and, for a split second, expect him to walk through the kitchen door, barefoot, half asleep, mumbling about physics or movies or some weird dream he had. Other times, I'll hear a song he liked and feel the grief come out of nowhere, like a tide pulling me under. But I carry it now, the pain, the guilt, the memory, not like a wound, but like a weight I've learned how to lift. I'm not sure if that makes me a hero or just a brother with too much grief and too much guilt. Maybe both, maybe neither. All I know is this: if you're ever tempted to write your own ending, please make sure someone reads it before you do, because maybe they'll see something you can't. Maybe they'll remind you that pain isn't prophecy, that a moment of despair doesn't mean a life without worth, that even if the words feel ugly, raw, unfinished, they still matter. You still matter. And if you can't say it out loud, write it down. And if you can't write it down, stay. Because somewhere, someone is carrying a story that might help you understand your own. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not even soon, you'll get to tell yours. And it won't be the end. It'll be the middle, the part where things begin again.